Estelle, David, and Andrea and Eitan. And I think that's it on Zoom. And everyone who's on Facebook, I can't see who you are. Your faces are hidden behind your masks. But lovely to see everyone. So we're going to mute so that we can get started. Nothing personal, okay, honestly. But we're going to make Zoom into, oh gosh, I just lost you. Hold on. Let me just go back to meeting. And if everyone can try and mute themselves, I will try and mute. Let's try and, 1 minute. Let's go to settings. Participants, right. Anshul's helping me. Mute all. Okay. Okay. Right. Everyone now is muted. Okay. Welcome, everyone. So we are doing something slightly different today. Let me just get everyone. How do I see everyone at the same time? Hold on. I'm doing my phone here. Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay. Right. So what we are doing is we are using a new piece of, well, for me, it's new technology. Everything's new. It's called StreamYard. And basically in future, what happens is it's a platform whereby we can just go on that and then it sends out, it transmits my messages, my voice to Facebook and to YouTube Live. So it's a much easier form of communication. And eventually we can do away with Zoom and hopefully we can all be on one thing as opposed to now where I've got two screens and I'm trying to flit between the two and to control the two. It'll be a much better a better quality production, I hope. Okay, so we can try that as opposed to me being two-faced and looking at two screens all at once. Okay, so we are I think about ready to start. So what we are going to do tonight by popular demand is we are going to firstly do some questions that I have, and after that we can throw it open. I have to tell you, there is one question. Wherever I walk, people bump into me, and not literally, of course, no, but from a distance they bump into me. So a social distancing bumping in, and they everyone seems to have the same question on their minds at the moment, which we will deal with later in the show. So let's first deal with the immediate questions which we have, and then we can come on to some of the others. Okay. So, dear Rabbi, okay. Isn't that a nice way to start? Dear Rabbi, okay, my father and I entered a business venture together, which unfortunately failed. The problem is it has come between us. He blames me for making him lose so much money, and he won't talk to me. I came across only last week your name, and I thought maybe you could offer some advice about what I and we can do. So the story is told of a young woman who came to one of the Rebbes, and she had had a feud with her mother over a sum of money. And the Rebbe had lost his mother that particular year. And therefore he replied to this young woman, he said to her with tremendous sadness, I just lost my mother this year. Do you know how much money I would give to be able to see her just one more time? You have your mother, and yet you allow money to tear you apart. And it's, it's so sad when so often we hear of stories about misunderstandings and foibles and broiguses and arguments and disputes that come between family members and close friends. And very often it can be about money and the like. So if we think about what is truly precious to us and what we cherish and what is going to endure for the longevity of life, money comes and money goes. I don't need to tell you in the current climate that is abundantly clear. And therefore, whenever we have any disputes about anything, be it about financials or anything else, we really need to take a long-term view and look at things in the big picture rather than being caught up and holding grudges for the long term. So that's a simple answer to a relatively straightforward question. Okay, I hope you're getting your thinking now whilst I'm asking these questions about any questions that you may have. Okay, so let's do another one. Okay, my grandfather is critically ill, and I just found out that he has requested that he should be cremated. My mother is adamant that she will respect his dying wishes. I know Jewish law is against cremation, but I want to know, how big a deal is it? So the first part of the question is correct in a sense, and that is that, generally speaking, if a person makes a will and makes a tzavah, in Hebrew it's a tzavah, a will, then we are expected as the next of kin to carry out the wishes of the deceased. And so an executor of a will is also expected to carry out the wishes of the deceased, their client, right? Usually. So there is an exception. If it is, for example, that it is abundantly clear to the children that, or the children feel strongly that this is not what, their parent really wanted, or they don't really want it, there is a possibility, if all the children wanted to band together, and it has happened before, that they could potentially try to avoid having a cremation. So it's not easy. But obviously the ideal thing to do would be to approach that parent in the latter years of that parent's life and to be able to have that conversation. How often have I been in a situation where after a parent is passed away, or when they are dying, and then all of a sudden the children and the family really do want to have a place to be able to visit. They want to be able to mourn the loss, and they realize that deep down, that the idea of a cremation, which may have been a whim or a passing fad, it's not really in the interest of their loved one or for them to have a cremation. And we only have to think, for us in Judaism, what is the problem with a cremation? So it is not just our souls that have sanctity, but our bodies, our physical bodies, also have sanctity. And that is because throughout our lives, right, we have sanctified ourselves through the transcendent good deeds and mitzvot and spirituality that we have taken on. So with the hands that we have used, with the feet that have carried us to mitzvot, the mouths that we have used to ingest and to speak kind words, so we become, as it were, a living, breathing spiritual entity. And therefore it's not for us to be able to decide and to determine that we don't want, it's past its sell-by date. We no longer need our bodies. And in fact, we know that the bodies, when they are buried, it's like planting a seed in the soil. That is the description. Because ultimately we say every day in davening, we say Mechaye Hamesim, that God is the resurrector of the dead. In other words, we know that in the long term we are all going to come back to life, and to come back to life there has to be a unification of body and soul, and therefore it's essential that we do so. If we think about over the course of the millennia, you go back to 9/11, you go back to the Holocaust, and so many Jewish people that would have loved and wished that they could have had, their loved ones could have had a proper burial, and yet they were cremated. There are no remains. We only have to think about just over a year ago, where we attended Bushey Cemetery and they found the remains of the Kedoshim, those six loved ones that passed away in the Holocaust. We don't know who they were, if they're father or mother or children, and yet we took what was left, which was not much, and we buried them in the ground of Bushey. So we have to bear in mind that ultimately body and soul are going to be reunited. It's not for us to take the bodies and to do with it as we want, as we mentioned previously, and it is our bodies over the course of our lifetime become more transcendent, more spiritual, and therefore it is important that we treat it with the dignity and respect that it is deserved. And that for that reason, therefore, when a person passes on, we know there is what's called the Chevra Kedusha, perform a tahara, a purification of the body, so that it can be buried in an appropriate way. So that's that question. Okay, onwards and upwards we go. Okay, so let me just see which other questions we have. Okay, let me do a few more light-hearted questions because it was quite heavy, that one. Okay, so the question here is, okay, Coca-Cola Anyone here still drink Coca-Cola? Who likes a cold glass of Coca-Cola? No? Let's see is there anyone on Zoom that drinks Coca-Cola? Gary? Paul Martin? Karen? Occasionally? Yes? Okay. Oh, apparently you're pointing down to Gary. It's not always. Why is it his fault? Okay. Anyways, sometimes, or at least we remember back. So the question about Coca-Cola is this. We know that one of the trademarks of Coca-Cola is the fact that there is this secret formula. Okay? Nobody knows the formula. In fact, the myth has it that the formula is divided between two of the executives that have part of the formula, and it's only when they come together that they have the whole formula. That's at least one of the myths that they have about Coca-Cola. Well, the question is, how can it be that when it comes to the Kashrus guide and the Pesach guide, we have kosher LePesach Coca-Cola? How can we have Coca-Cola that is kosher? Nobody knows the secret formula. So I have heard two answers to this, and there is actually a whole article. I haven't had a chance to go through it, but there is a whole article about one rabbi that just passed away, and one of his tasks as part of being the Rav Machshir in America was that to give the hechsher to Coca-Cola. And apparently his predecessor was the one that first approached Coca-Cola and made the necessary adjustments so that it could be kosher. One version is that they give them a full list of the ingredients for Coke, but they don't say how much of each ingredient they put in. And the other one is that they actually give them exactly what it says on the, I was going to say tin, but on the bottle. But rather than disclose anything, there is a non-disclosure agreement that is signed with the rabbi in question. I presume the former rather than the latter, but there we go. But there is no question that the rabbi who gives the hechsher, and I know when it was first mooted, they had to discuss this and come to a conclusion, but he did know the ingredients, and we know that the real Coca-Cola buffs, Gary, you should listen to this. When it comes to Pesach, they know that there is a difference between Pesach Coca-Cola and the whole of the rest of the year of Coca-Cola, and that is the corn syrup that is replaced for sugar syrup or whatever it is. And therefore, there are some people that want the authentic, the original Coca-Cola, and therefore they buy tons of Coca-Cola when it comes to Pesach because that's the original taste. Okay, that's question number one about kashrus. Question number two is about buying fish. So we know that there are two signs for fish, fins and scales. So the question is, I hope you can hear me. I hope everyone can hear me. On 1 second. The question exists about, can we buy fish without a hechsher, right? So the salmon and the like, we know that let's take a step back. When you go to a fishmonger, although it's wonderful and admirable to go to a kosher fishmonger, according to the Kashrus guide, you do not have to go to it. If you go to a fishmonger, right, and you buy a whole fish, there's no problem. And even if you were to buy a part of a fish, if it has the scales on it still, then, and it's from a kosher variety, then that is absolutely permissible. The question arises when we have salmon, right, which is sold in packets, and you cannot see. It could be skinless salmon. So can you buy skinless fish? Remember, the idea of the skin is that you can clearly see the hallmarks, because if it's got scales, it's got fins. So therefore, you know that it's a kosher variety. The question is, where it is skinned, you don't know. You only go by what the wrapper says. And the answer is that when you are buying from something like a supermarket and it's salmon, it is so distinctive, and there have never been any stories about it. And therefore, you can buy packaged salmon, even though it doesn't have a hechsher. There was stories relating to tuna. I don't remember the exact thing. I think they were putting something else. I think it was dolphin that they were putting in the tuna instead, or as a combination, and therefore there were problems with tuna, and therefore people should look out for that. I can't give you the update whether it is safe or not safe, but you should rely on the isitkosher.org, and they will give you, or isitkosher.uk, and they will give you the up-to-date with tuna and everything else. So those are the two kashrus ones. What about we've all heard of the Da Vinci codes, right? We've all heard of the Amiga codes. What about the Torah codes or the biblical codes? Anyone ever heard of the Torah codes? No? Yes? Okay. So the Torah codes are something that goes back to the medieval period, Nachmanides and the like, and that is that there are patterns that have been discovered between the letters and the positioning of words that clearly hints to different aspects and different seeming messages in the Torah. So, for example, if you were to take the 50th letter of the Torah, and it spells the word, every 50th letter spell in the Torah spells the word Bereshit. Yeah, sorry, every 50th letter from Bereshit spells the word Torah. Okay, 50 letters, Tov, 50 letters, Vav, etc. Similarly, the 25th word in the Torah is the word light, right? And Hanukkah, we know, is on the 25th day of Kislev. So there are many, many codes in the Torah. We understand the Torah on different levels. 4 basic levels is the system that we have. Pshat is plain meaning. In other words, Moshe walked, etc. Right? In other words, the facts, the narrative that we understand. Then there is remez, hint, right? Allusions. So those are things that are not explicit, but they are hinted to. And one of this codes are one aspect of the hints in the Torah, gematrias and the like. And if you want to see them, the Balaturim is one of the authorities and famous for it. Look him up online, Google Balaturim, you'll see loads of codes. And he writes, it's in the Chumash, it's an early commentator. And then there is what we call drush, which is homiletic exegesis, where we are able to deduce and expound on the words of the Torah, not according to the plain meaning, but to learn lessons and deep ideas. And then there is Sod, which is the hidden mystical aspects of the Torah, like the Kabbalah and other mystical ideas, which are only for the really advanced students, because, of course, if one doesn't have the necessary foundations, then one can end up with a skewed vision. So Torah codes are very nice in supplementing and illusions and supplementing the ideas that we know to be true, but they shouldn't be substituted for the authentic real learning. It's nice when you see an illusion that supports what we've already known, but at the end of the day, we don't rely on them. In other words, we don't say that there is Hanukkah because they're 25 letters apart, you know? And they always say that, the cynics say that, you know, Bar Ilan, they came up with this computer code program. And the idea is that you can have a question and then, you know, it will give you the answer. And so the cynics say that if you want a certain answer, you put in your answer to Bar Ilan, and out pops. Sorry, you put in your the answer that you want, and out pops the rabbi who will give you that answer to the question. So the idea is the codes are not meant to be a substitute. It's nice that we see things, illusions in gaps and in juxtapositions, but again, it's not a substitute for the main part of our learning. Okay, we're going to stop in a minute, just one or two other questions that we had, and that is about miracles. And then I'll deal with the COVID question that everyone's been asking. So the question is about, are there miracles nowadays, right? Somebody were to say to you that they experienced a miracle, would you believe them or not? Do we believe in miracles? So there are two types in Judaism. The simple answer is yes and no. In other words, there were open miracles that were from the Bible era, right? But as the generations declined, those open miracles became a thing of the past. And therefore, there was a normalization of life, and there is a normal order, if you want, cause and effect. But one of the things that is a fundamental belief in Judaism, and that is that everything that is what we call nature, right, cause and effect, really in itself is a hidden miracle, right? It's just something. Miracles are things that hidden miracles are just things that happen every single day and every second of our life. It's just because they happen so frequently, therefore we take them for granted and we don't see it as miraculous. But it is no less miraculous, as we all know, any type of microorganism or any type of cell, human cell, the complexities in the design of the world and nothing is more or less, miraculous than if you were to see, the sea splitting or anything else from a bygone era. Why is that more miraculous than that? The fact is, we're just familiar and used to certain things, and therefore we take them for granted. But we know that, if a person goes to a place and has what we call an open miracle, I don't know, let's say, something miraculous happened when you were traveling, then you would make a special blessing on experiencing an open miracle, something that occurred to you. And there are many stories that abound. We're going to move on to a final point, and that is relating to the current crisis and the question that has arisen with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. What's going to be? Well, I have to tell you, in my hand, I have a crystal ball, and I can tell you exactly the way things are going to work out on Rosh Hashanah. In the first day, we're all going to be in shul, sitting next to each other, and COVID will be a thing of the past, and that's the way it's going to be. Well, that's certainly not the case, and anyone that can tell you the way things are going to be on Rosh Hashanah is lying, okay? What I can tell you is as follows, and I'm going to reiterate it because on my walk around the block where I try to cross the road to avoid everyone, but people shouted across and everyone wants to know, what's going to be with Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi? What are you going to do? And what are you going to do with Nila and Yizka? Well, the answer is quite simply, we don't know. But what we do know is that we have a couple of guiding principles. And one is that we have to safeguard and preserve life, and that is of overriding importance. And I will say that again and again. And number two, we have to be sensible, okay? And we have to consult with experts. Rabbis are experts in halacha. We are not experts, and we do not profess to be experts when it comes to medicine and science. And therefore, at the highest level, they will consult, and they are consulting with scientists and with medical practitioners and government ministers, and we will be guided by them. And we always will err on the side of caution. So it is far, far too early to start thinking and worrying about what's going to be, in several months' time. We don't even know what's going to be next month. Please God, it will disappear. Numbers will keep declining, and it will be, something will be back to normal. Or, God forbid, people can be silly, not listen to the government's warnings and not listening to social distancing, and we can be back to where we were a month ago. We don't know. But what I can say is that the United Synagogue of all organizations is going to tread with exceptional caution, even though it may cause some frustration. And people may say, well, why is it they're going back to shul and we're not going back to shul? So we will definitely only go back when it is considered safe. And even when it is safe, there are many people that I will tell, or the United Synagogue will tell them, you should not be coming to shul, okay? Because there is no way that anybody can give you 100% guarantee, right, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur this year, that there is not going to be the slightest hint and suspicion of COVID in the air, right? It is an impossibility. You can say that, we've taken all the necessary steps, we've taken all the necessary measures, we've done the very best we can. But somebody that is in a vulnerable position, somebody that is considered, in a weak state, then clearly, regrettably, and it is exceptionally difficult for many people that are staring Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the face and saying, I can't believe I've never missed a Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. How am I going to manage? I can't daven. I can't pray. What am I going to do? So it's very, very difficult for people, and it's easy for us to say, on the one hand, don't come. But for these people, it's very, very difficult. And of course, it's the right thing. We have to be sympathetic that if people can't come to shul, as much as we can, we try to provide them, supplement them with materials. And it must be that we provide them, for example, beforehand with stuff that can help and inspire them. And if there is a possibility of finding a way of them having something in an open space, if it is possible, then we will do it. And if we are advised by the doctors and medical practitioners and scientists not to, then we won't. So it is far too early. We can put in plans as much as we want, and everyone can sit down, and many have sent me ideas. But at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to be, and we will have a careful look at it nearer the time. So that's it about that. I now throw it open to all of you. So if you are on Facebook, you can send a question in. If you're on Zoom, you can. I'm happy to unmute you, and then you can ask a question. Let's see if this works. Let me try and unmute everyone. Okay, behave if I unmute you. Okay, hold on. Let me try again. 1 minute. Okay, unmute all. Okay, so I've unmuted, I think, everyone. Let's just go back. Okay, anyone? Yes, Paul Martin has a question.
No, I was just congratulating you on unmuting me.
Oh.
My wife has been trying to do the opposite for all these years.
Okay. Any questions? Jeffrey, any questions? Jonathan, any questions? Gary, Karen? Nice and loud, because you've got to be heard on Facebook.
Right, well, I was going to say this. You were talking before about miracles, and there are sort of miracles which happened in the Torah, which we know about, when various amazing things happen, like crossing of the river and the sea, and so on and so forth. Because these were miracles which were contrary to nature, although in modern days people have tried to explain them away as earthquakes or the other things. I'm prepared to believe in miracles because certain things happened to me, particularly about 30 years ago, which were totally inexplicable other than a sort of miracle. So I'm prepared to believe in miracles. It's just sad that for me there've not been many ever since. So I just wanted to sort of throw that into the equation. The other thing was you were talking about Yom Nora'im. I trust that if we are not able to gather together in shul, you will nevertheless produce one of your customary Yom Nora'im sermons, and this will be typed up and circulated to all members of the community.
Absolutely, Jeffrey. So yes, we would definitely make sure, as we said, that there will be materials, plenty of materials that will be circulated beforehand. Whatever happens, I can't see all of us being in shul for the whole of a service. So everyone is going to be in a position of compromise and having to do part of the services at home. And there'll have to be give and take on the part of everyone this year to ensure that we all have a meaningful experience and keep each other and ensure that we are all safe. All right?
In past years, very few people have been there for the whole of the service.
Yep. Okay. So there you go, Jeffrey. Okay. Anyone else with questions? Paul Martin.
Well, just about what you were saying about miracles, different kinds of miracles. I suppose that we often overlook what are obviously miracles. And we say in the Amida, don't we, that, the miracles are happening every day, every hour, all the time. We say it in the Amida.
Yeah, we say it in modern. Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So Paul was just saying that there are miracles every day that we speak about. And as we already mentioned earlier, if we think about the physical body, we think about the anatomy, and we think about every aspect of creation, it's all miraculous. In a sense, it's all miraculous. It's all a wonder. Every second, we believe that that the Almighty is recreating. In other words, creation doesn't happen as a one-off and he stepped away. He's actively involved in the creation and recreation every second that this world is existing. So he breathes life, as it were, into us and into this world every second, which keeps and subsists this world. Any other questions about any other topics? We want to try and broaden it a bit. Alan and Pam, Richard, Farah, David, Andrea, anyone else on Facebook? I can't see.
I don't want to hog things, but can I ask a question about the fish?
Oh, hold on 1 second. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Go on. Fish.
You were talking about buying fish from a kosher or a non-kosher outlet. fish, when you go into a fishmonger, is presented as open and billeted and may have had some of its scales removed. What's the situation with fish like that? Do you have to check it all?
So the concern is whether there are fins and scales. Okay, if it is in pieces, right, and it is from a non-Jewish, a non-kosher fishmonger, then I would say it is of concern and I wouldn't buy it. If it is, for example, that it is a side of a salmon, for example, and you can clearly see what it is, then that would be possible to buy, even though it's not a whole one. And then you can just, what you're meant to do is, because obviously it's been cut with not potentially cut with a non-kosher knife, right, that's been used for other fish, we don't know what it's been used for, you're meant to take a knife and just scrape the sides where the cut has been made on the fish, and then wash it off, wash the knife off, wash the fish off, and that's all you need to do. That's just as a precaution, because we don't know which knife they use and what they cut with it beforehand, but that is permissible to do. But again, if there are scales, then we presume there were definitely fins. But that if you're buying individual pieces of fish, it may be that it would be preferable not to, unless you know exactly what it is. If it's very distinctive, if it's got scales in it and you know what it is, that's one thing. But if it's all in a mix and they're selling non-kosher as well, I think buyer beware would be the answer. Okay, we're going to move on beyond the fish. Last question, because it's 8:30. Any other questions? Can't see everyone's faces, so I don't know what the questions are. Let's just see, is there anything else on the Facebook? Any other questions? Gary, Karen, any questions tonight? No, we're all gone quiet over there. John, any questions? No? Yes? Hold on, I just lost them. Okay, so the other question that came up, we'll do one final question. Hello? Richard, any questions? Estelle?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm enjoying listening to you.
Oh, okay. So I'm just trying to manage with both using both systems. So the final question that it's not a major question, but people wonder why it is that we see up to 3 years old, a boy walking around with long hair, right? It's quite strange why religious boys are walking around looking like George Best, or it's a strange thing. What's the Beatles look? What's with all that? And the answer is that there is there's a couple of answers, but I'll give you one. That up to the age of 3 is a time where we find that there is of tremendous growth, where children are really developing and, as it were, setting themselves up. So let me give the analogy. The analogy is that we human beings are compared to trees. And the first 3 years of a tree's existence, a tree's life, we are not allowed to take its fruit. We are meant to leave it so that it is able to gain strength and to, as it were, establish itself, so that it will be able to withstand the winds of change. And therefore, the idea of the not cutting the hair is symbolic, right? Some do cut, some don't, but those that don't cut and leave it till the 3rd birthday is the idea that we want to impress, we want our children, as it were, take on this idea of establishing themselves. They start to make blessings, and once they've started, they're conceived to start learning. Then at the age of 3, then their hair is cut, and at that stage, then we cut the hair. And in fact, you should cut the hair, because boys, generally speaking, are not meant to walk around looking with a long hair look. But that's just a side point. And in terms of the sideburns, sometimes we see people with peyot, sideburns. Why would they do that? So that is, we know that we have to not round off the corners, which we all do in any case. But the question is, why do they leave it longer than that? And that is purely a stringency and a look, in order that they've associated with religiosity and a certain sect, that they wanted to look distinctive and to look Jewish. And therefore, the same way as a hat was seen as Jewish, so too having long sideburns or peyot curls is also considered a distinctive pride in their Jewish identity. And we know the Nazis, the first thing that they did was that they wanted to shave off, well, they didn't even shave off. They cut off the beard, they cut off the peyot, because they knew that those were the signs of being a Jew, and therefore they wanted to ridicule them. So that is why they do it. Do we have to do it? Certainly not. We just have to make sure that we don't round off, and that is our requirement. So I don't think there are any other questions at this stage. Somebody did raise the question about shofar blowing, but we've got so many weeks to Rosh Hashanah. We'll save that one for another day. So I think we've covered numerous areas in terms of interpersonal relations, in terms of kashrut, in terms of us on God with miracles, and there was something for everything. Again, I'd encourage you, please email in your questions, WhatsApp text, so that we can deal with the questions next time we meet. We look forward to seeing everyone on Wednesday, which is a standalone share on why is Shavuot such a fantastic festival. Tomorrow is Rabbi Kiva's big conversation. It's coming across my screen on Facebook. So we look forward to everyone joining us for that. Mishnahs tomorrow morning. And then Thursday, a late edition, which, apologies, Karen, I'm sure you'll get it up on this eventually on the website. And that is a NHS cooking challenge that I've been set to be able to make a 7-tiered cake. And that is before Gila's challah make on Friday. So have a great week. Lovely. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us.
Can you please make sure that the password and the ID and everything else for the Wednesday night thing is sent out?
It's the same. It's exactly the same. Whenever I'm on Zoom, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
The same one that you're on now is the same one on Wednesday. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Take care. Keep safe, keep well. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.